Hey, you guys. This is Mr. Morel, and we're going to talk about interval notation today. Now, in years past, you guys have definitely talked about how to read things like this. Like, you know how to read that and say, oh, x is less than or equal to 4. And you've also, been able to look at number lines and know what that says. I don't want to spoil the surprise because it's coming up. Well, why don't I spoil the surprise? Because it'll help me. Can I redo this? No. Okay. So if we look at that number line, we can see that this dark arrow is kind of coloring and highlighting every number that would be bigger than or equal to, because that's a colored in dot, that's coming, I'll explain that more in a little bit, greater than or equal to the number 4. And down here in question 4, we see that the dark arrow is showing us any number that is less than the number 4. And notice it has a white dot there, so we kind of don't include the number 4, but we would include anything that was smaller than the number 4. That's cool, but what we've talked about, oh my gosh, sorry, I keep pushing buttons and I don't mean to. Okay, what we talked about in class is different ways to write the same thing. So since we have this stuff kind of figured out, I'm going to start with the options, and let's try to match the options to the numbers above. So when I look at this here, what that's telling me is that I want every single number that is between 4 and infinity. Okay? And hopefully you realize if we're including any number that is between 4 and infinity, that means we're talking about numbers that are greater than 4. Now, with interval notation, there's this weird thing where we can have parentheses, or we can have brackets, or sometimes we have a combination of the two. What that means is that a parenthesis means that our numbers, our x number that we're looking at, could equal anything. How do you describe that? Okay, I'm going to come down here and actually use this example. What this parenthesis right here means is that x could be any number that is greater than 4, and we could get super duper close to the number 4, but we could never actually equal the number 4. Now, if you look at B right here, that means that we could get super duper close to the number 4, and we're going to equal the number 4. So parentheses is kind of like having an open circle if you were looking at a number line, or not having the little underline under the alligator mouth. So let's just kind of talk about the answers here. So the answer to number A is that we're looking at any number that is bigger than 4, but can't actually equal 4. Well, number 1 is saying that x is less than or equal to 4, so that's definitely not the right answer. Number 2, we already talked about, was any number greater than or equal to 4. Well, we don't want to equal 4. We have a parenthesis there. Then number 3 says x is greater than 4. Well, that's awesome, because that's what we just said that we wanted x to equal. Okay? B says that x could be between 4 and infinity, and it cannot equal, and it can equal 4. Now, I want to also cover this parenthesis on this side. The reason why there's a parenthesis on that side by the infinity is because infinity isn't actually a real number. We can't plug it in for x the way that we do other things. So anytime you see a parenthesis in this interval notation, it will always have a parenthesis around it, because we would not want to include the number infinity, because infinity is not a real number. Okay, but here on number B, we have a bracket, which means that we want any number between 4 and infinity, and we will include the number 4. So we want any number greater than or equal to 4. Well, number 1 is looking for numbers less than or equal to 4. Number 2 is looking for any number greater than or equal to 4. Oh, that's what we just said that we wanted. So we know the answer to number 2 is B. All right, C. C is saying, okay, we want any number between negative infinity and the number 4. We could get super duper close to the number 4, but we can't equal the number 4 because of that. And then we can get close to negative infinity, which isn't a real number, which means that we just get really, 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 really small. So essentially what C is asking for is any number between negative infinity and 4 without equaling 4. Or in other words, any number less than 4. Well, number 1 is looking for any number less than or equal to 4. That's not what we're looking for. And number 4 is just looking for, oh yeah, x is less than 4. That's perfect. That's what we wanted. So that's going to be C. And of course we know where D belongs, but let's talk about why. That's looking for any number between negative infinity and the number 4. And with this big square bracket here, that means that it could equal the number 4. So we're going to call number 1 D, because that's x is any number less than or equal to the number 4. Alright, so down here it's going to be kind of a similar task, only instead of, what am I saying? Instead of multiple choice, we actually have to write things in. And I'll show you different techniques how to move around here. So the inequality, we're given 2 items, we've got to find the third on level 2. So we know that x is less than or equal to negative 2. We see a number line showing us negative 2. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I need to backtrack. This is telling us x is greater than or equal to negative 2. We see a number line that shows us all of the numbers that are bigger than or equal to, notice the colored in dot, negative 2. And now we need to write an interval. Well, let me give you a hint. To do this, I do a couple of, I'll talk you through different techniques. I'm sorry I'm struggling today. My head is a little confused. What I usually do is I kind of set up 2 numbers with a comma. And this first number, I'm going to ask myself the question, what is the smallest possible number that x could be? You could either look at the number line or read the inequality. The smallest number x could be is negative 2. Then I would ask myself, what is the biggest number that x could be? Well, this arrow right here is implying that x could go all the way up to infinity. Now I need to decide if I put parentheses or brackets. So, starting with negative 2, let me kind of erase some of this stuff. I'm going to ask myself, okay, could x equal negative 2? Well, yeah, it can, because I see a little underline over here. I see a colored dot right there. Negative 2 is one of the possible numbers that x could be. Then I ask, could x equal infinity? Well, not really, because infinity is not actually a number that we can plug in. So I'm going to put a parenthesis around infinity. Okay, I know that's confusing, but let's try number 6. So number 6, we've got to kind of say how x is related to 0. So I can kind of set this up. I know I'm going to have an x, I know I'm going to have a 0. I just need to decide if I'm going to put the less than, the greater than, the less than or equal to, or the greater than or equal to sign right there. Well, if I'm looking at this number line here, that's telling me that x is going to be all of these numbers that are smaller than 0. Same idea here. X is going to be any number between negative infinity and 0. So to me, when I read that, I know for sure that 0 is the biggest number. X is going to be any number that is smaller than 0. Now, the question is, should we underline that or not? Well, we've got this open circle, and we have a parenthesis over here, which means that x cannot equal 0. So I'm going to leave it the way that we have it. All right, let's do question 7. We haven't done a number line question yet. So, question 7. This says that x is less than or equal to negative 4. This is telling us that x is going to be any number between negative infinity and negative 4. And this big bracket is telling us that it could equal negative 4. So these two things are saying the exact same thing. We just need to represent them on the number line. So we definitely know that negative 4 is a big part of what we're doing. So I'm going to put a circle there. Now I want to figure out if I should color that circle in or not. Well, we've got this underline here telling us it could equal it, And we have the square bracket here also telling us that x could equal -4. So I'm going to go ahead and color in that circle to include the number -4. Then I want all of the numbers smaller than that. So remember, smaller numbers on a number line go to the left. And that's helpful because we want to go towards -infinity. All right, let's go ahead and skip questions 8 and 9, but let's do question 10. Ooh, question 10 is a little tricky, but if you understand the idea that we were talking about above, this should be pretty easy. Okay, here, this inequality is telling us that x is going to be between -3 and 1. It can't equal -3, but it could equal 1. That's what this number line is showing us, that we're going to be all of these numbers between -3 and 1. It can't equal -3, but it could equal 1. Okay, so when I go to do my interval, remember, I start by finding my two numbers. What's the smallest number that x might be? And that is going to be -3. Then, what's the biggest number that x could be? And that would be the number 1. Now, to figure out my parentheses and brackets, could x equal -3? Well, no, we don't have the underline, and we've got the open circle, so I'm going to put a parenthesis. Could x equal 1? Well, yeah, it could equal 1 because of the underline here, because of the closed circle there, so I'm going to put a bracket. All right. Now, number 12 is a little trickier. Let's do that one. When I see two numbers and no infinity, like I know x is going to be any number between -5 and 5, that's exactly what this number line is showing here. I will usually set it up so that I write the number -5 on that side, I write the number 5 there, and then I put an x in the middle. Now I just got to make sure that my alligator mouths are doing the right thing. I will always, when I set this up this way, I always have my alligator mouths eating this way. Then I have to figure out if I'm doing underlines. Could x equal -5? Well, no. I've got an open circle there and a parenthesis there, so I know x cannot equal -5, so I don't underline that inequality sign, that alligator mouth. Could x equal a +5? Well, no. I've got an open circle there and a parenthesis there. So once again, I'm going to leave the alligator mouth alone, and that's the answer that I should write down on number 12. All right, let's go on to the back side. Here, I only give you one piece of information, and it's your job to fill in the other two. I'm going to do questions 14 and 20. All right. Now, for me, it's usually helpful, no matter what I'm given, to go to the number line first. So, when I see that x is greater than or equal to -2, here's how I make a number line. I usually just throw a line down. I label one of these numbers as 0. It doesn't matter which, as long as I have some space on the left, and I can call that one -2. We could have just as easily called this one -2 and that one 0. Or we could have called that 0 and that -2. It really doesn't matter as long as your scale is consistent. But since we're only numbering two numbers, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you want to number that -2, you could number that -4, -6, 2, 4, and 6 like that. Or if we go back to the way it was to start off, 0, -1, -2, -3, 1, 2, 3. It doesn't matter as long as we label it. Okay, so let's leave it like that. I know that 0 is greater than or equal to -2, so I'm going to put a circle around -2. I did say or equal to, so I'm going to color it in. And then I had said greater than, so I want all of the numbers greater. I'm going to go like that. Now I come to my interval. Okay, what's the smallest number x could be? Well, it's going to be a -2. It's the farthest to the left that we see over here. Could x equal -2? Well, yeah, I have an underline and a colored in circle, so I'm going to put a square bracket. What's the biggest number x could be? Well, there's no limit there. It could go all the way up to infinity. So I'm going to put an infinity there. Can x equal infinity? Well, no. It's not a real number. That's just an idea. So we're going to put a parenthesis around it. So my interval is bracket, -2, comma, infinity, parenthesis. Alright, let's go down to number 20. Here, we're given the interval. We need to make a number line and then write our inequality. Okay, the smallest number x could be is -3. The biggest is 12. This is a little tricky to scale the graph, but if you're doing these level 3 questions, that should be okay. Why don't we just call, I don't know, this number 0. I'll call that number -3, which would make that -6. Then we can call this 3, 6, 9, and 12. I think that's the most reasonable way to fit everything onto this number line. Okay, so I'm going to put a circle at -3 and ask, can x equal -3? Well, yeah, I've got a bracket there, so I can go ahead and say that x could equal -3. So x is going to be between -3 and 12, so it's going to go up to 12. And we have a bracket, so it could equal 12, and it's going to equal all of the numbers in between. So, same thing, I'm going to set up my number, -3 and 12, put an x in the middle. My alligator mouse, when I set it up this way, will always eat in that direction. Then I need to figure out if they need underlines or not. Well, I've got a colored in circle and a bracket, so I need an underline. I've got a colored in circle and a bracket, so I need an underline. So -3 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 12. Alright, good luck. And if you're watching this video, let me give you a little hint. You can Google these words if you want, or if you're watching this, that's great. But, well, I don't really need to tell you stuff. You just need to translate these words, solve the inequality, which is something that we are going to focus more on tomorrow, but that's why it's a level 4 question, is to see your ideas about solving. Okay? But the other idea that I wanted you to know here is the word sum, product, and quotient. These are words to Google if you need to. I would Google, okay, what is a sum? What is a product? And what is a quotient? And that should give you some ideas. Alright, I will see you guys in the next video. Make good choices. Bye!